Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Motorsports Enthusiast podcast. My name is John Drudges, your host, and on today's episode, we're going to be covering a lot of fun stuff, career talk, Atlanta talk, Ross versus Denny, Circuit of the Americas, all this fun stuff, and I have a special guest on, Taylor Kitchen. She's a great creator in the space, and I'm excited to have her on. Taylor, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, like I mentioned before, we are going to be talking about strictly NASCAR this episode. A lot of fun stuff going on in the series with just coming off of Atlanta Super Speedway, completely changing over, going to COTA, where we have Formula One drivers, IMSA drivers, Jordan Taylor making a big splash in practice that we're going to talk about. But first, let's just dive into just who we are. So Taylor, I'll let you take the floor. Give me a little insight about who you are, what you do, and how you got into motorsports.
Oh gosh. So I'm really new to this space. All things considered, I know a lot of folks are lifelong fans. I am not. I started watching NASCAR when I was 16. I'm now 23. So about like 7-ish, 5-ish years. Math is hard. But so I've been in here for a short amount of time. But since that time, my grandma got me into the sport. She took me to my first in-person race with my siblings. And at that point I was hooked. It was Kentucky Speedway 2017.
Oh, Kentucky.
Yeah. Miss Kentucky, the racing wasn't the best, but it was always a great time. And, as I was getting more and more into the sport, I started to tweet a lot on Twitter. And because I wanted to share the experience with other people. I'm from a small town in Ohio, and not a lot of people talked about racing. And come 2021, I was like, okay, well, what do I do now? You can only type so much. I want to be able to talk at a higher volume about the sport. And also there weren't a lot of women in the space that were doing content creation like I wanted to do at the time, at least. So I started my own brand Above the Yellow Line, talking about the NASCAR Cup Series, the news, industry insight from the fan perspective. And for me at that time, from a new fan perspective. So I started that show as an audio only podcast. We moved to doing video and audio at the same time. And in 2022, in April, I was picked up by TobyChristie.com, an amazing motorsports outlet that I had followed for years before I got actually a Twitter message from Toby when he was like, hey, give me a call. And I was like, all right.
Wow. So, yeah. Say less.
Yeah. Say less. So joined him. And that same year as well, I got an opportunity to do content creation and content management for Austin Terrio, Arca Champ, and working with him and his drivers, Howie DiCivino. And so that's been awesome. So yeah, like everything's moved really fast career wise. Like I said, it really started 2021, but that's a little bit just kind of about the path that I've been on, about what I'm doing now, and also all over social media. But you know this, John.
Gotcha. Exactly. Well, I didn't know you worked with ARCA drivers. That was a big thing that I didn't even know that was a part of your repertoire. So that's pretty incredible there. Toby Christie is a great personality in space. One of the bigger names, obviously, across the motorsport world, specifically within NASCAR and whatnot. So really talking about the landscape, I want to know your perspective from a new fan in the sport, as well as being a female. How have you seen the landscape of media change? I'm just really kind of curious about that from your eye.
So when I first started really diving into media side, I'll just start based on Twitter in 2016 in the NASCAR space, at least. It was very male dominated. It still is, but there weren't a lot of diverse voices. There was obviously different topics happening at the time. And then, 2020, when we had COVID and a lot of different social justice movements happening, that's when I started to notice a really big shift, getting different voices into the space, having different discourse. And even from the track, I don't know before 2020 how many races you went to, John, but from when I went to those races at Kentucky in 2017 to when I went to Charlotte Motor Speedway last year, the fan base and the diversity around the fan base has been totally different from what I've seen at the track. And that's been incredibly refreshing. And I see that in media as well. Something else I'm also seeing in media is a big spike on different platforms. You have your content creators that are tried and true on YouTube, but you're also seeing people appear in other spaces like Twitch now for motorsports, a lot more females in motorsports in that space. We're talking about more content on Instagram and then also TikTok as well. I started really taking advantage of, the TikTok algorithm and everything like that last November. That's when I started to really amp up my NASCAR coverage there because I felt like I could do something. I used that platform originally for chronic illness advocacy because that's a huge part of my life and my journey.
Mm-hmm.
And then I decided to post one day about NASCAR because I'm like, why not? Let's just do it. And it did really, really well. And I was like, all right, well, this is a different way to help expand my brand. So
Right.
essentially, and even too, I think you can speak to this as well, but over the past so many years, social media has gone from sharing maybe not so much about your personal life as much as it has been a really big tool for marketing and branding. So that's how I've really seen it shift.
Yeah, I'll second that. Because as my full-time job and career, I own a social media marketing agency. So I've been in the space and I'm deep in there every single day with clients across the country. And you're right. I mean, the new wave of social is so much about content that is focused on not only things going on in your personal life, but content that can be one-off, like what you did with the NASCAR content. You could post about anything these days. And if it's interesting, especially with TikTok and the algorithm, we'll talk a little bit about that later. We talked about this over text earlier, about where TikTok is right now. And but talking about specifically the landscape, anybody can post about anything and talk about anything. And it's really opened up with the emergence of a platform like TikTok. So like you said, you went from the advocacy of chronic illness to NASCAR. I mean, that's two polar different spectrums of content. And the fact that you've been able to do that just proves that, you could start a brand about anything, and start a business about anything. So very impressive that you've done that. While we're just really on the topic really quick, we'll get into the racing side of things, but we were going to talk about kind of what we've seen with TikTok going on in the news. And if you've paid attention to it, you know that they're under some heat right now from Congress, and whether it should stay, whether it should go. I'm on the side of I think it should stay, just because of one, the whole free speech argument, but two, they're arguing the whole data privacy and all this stuff, which I can understand to a point, but also you got to think about all the other platforms. And with me being in social media, knowing what happened with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica and things happening before that with other platforms, it's not, it's the same discussion. It's the same rodeo. We've been in this circle before, and I think there could be improvements to the platform, and where things could be moderated better, because there's been videos even that I've posted that have been completely fine and they get taken down for whatever it may be. But then you see some other content, you're like, how in the world is that still there? Yeah. So it's that. And I don't know if you've ever had any issues with any content being published that has gotten taken down for any reason. But for the work that I've done, there has been some where we're like, what in the world? Why is it getting taken down? And it's just hard to moderate. It's hard to moderate TikTok with 150 million users in America and having so much content out there. How do you do it?
Yeah. And I will say the only issue I think I've had with my content is a lot of my users have said that they were either not allowed to comment on my stuff, thought that I had blocked it, which I never do. One thing I pride myself on is letting people share their opinion, regardless of whether they're either not. Regardless of what they think, I like to let people share their opinion. Obviously, there is an extent as to if we are crossing a line and getting personal with different language. That's when I'm like, maybe not. But I like to keep my posts open for thoughts. And when everyone's like, hey, I can't comment anything, I'm like, oh, well, that's not on me. So reaching out to TikTok support, they don't know what the issue is. And I'm like, all right. So there's, like you said, there's things that need to be fixed with the platform. But if you do some digging, do some research, and actually for my school news, I covered this whole TikTok story a few weeks ago when it was just kind of really starting to kick in. And as you said, other platforms have had issues with data and privacy. It's not just specific to TikTok. It never will be. Other platforms also sell data. And I think that's something that a lot of us need to realize. It is also a free speech issue. I don't think I've ever been on a platform that's as free speech as TikTok is. It allows you to really express yourself in ways that Instagram, you can't do on Instagram. YouTube, they are really strict with certain rules and everything like that, copyright and everything.
Oh yeah, just with copyright alone, you're right.
Yeah. And so I feel restricted on that platform, even though that's kind of where I've really started to make my long form platform, but with TikTok, you can make short form, long form. You have free reign to be creative. But there are concerns, but I'm afraid if we lose that platform, it's going to spike a bigger debate on free speech. And it's where do we draw that line? But definitely, if you
Yeah.
haven't done your research into it, research it for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's I put out a video it was on Instagram and on TikTok, and it was literally last weekend. It was when I thought was a controversial safety car in Formula One with Lance Stroll going off the track, where was it really off track? Was it not? Everybody that's in my circle was like, he was off track. They shouldn't have thrown the caution. Max Verstappen was not frozen in the fourth position, but he made his way up from 15th to fourth by that time, and it closed in the field. And my whole point was like, okay, is this sparking a controversy that the FIA wants Verstappen to do well, and everybody, I mean, just threw a fit, threw a fit, because I'm a Ferrari fan. I have a Charles Leclerc hat on right now, but I can recognize that Max is a great driver. He has those tendencies to where he kind of cries a little bit. But then again, I'll say the same thing about Kyle Busch. He's a great driver. So it's the same thing there. But in the comments, kind of going to what you were saying about the review and people not being able to comment, there have been some videos, and I think there was one specifically on that where when I went to the TikTok comments, it said that there are some comments that were flagged and you have to review them.
Right.
And then on Instagram, I had a lot of comments that were I have some pretty thick skin, but some of them I was like, come on, like that's crossing the line. So obviously you gotta cross there has to be a line somewhere. Like you can debate with me all day, but point of the whole picture is, where's that line within content, and how can we still have the free speech capabilities like we do on TikTok without having content slip through the cracks that are on the wrong side of that, which I don't know if there's any way to moderate. I mean, this is a whole social media discussion now. But I don't know how you can moderate it.
I don't know either. And every social media app is struggling with this. I mean, Twitter is struggling with it big time. It changed ownership, still struggling. Facebook always struggling. Instagram struggles. Something that I think is interesting to bring up too, and you brought up a good point, is like, comments that you might get on your posts or whatever, and you got to have some thick skin to do it. I will say I don't know if it's just because I'm a woman in the field or what it is, but there have been some like bizarre and just downright just hurtful comments thrown my way. You have to learn to just block it out. But some things I'm like, man, all right.
It makes you take a step back and you're like, should I have really posted that? Because there was one where, I'm not going to repeat what the guy said, but I was like, I can take some stuff, but you're crossing a line. Obviously, I blocked it, but I couldn't imagine from your perspective what that would be like, because you have a couple things that you're new in the sport. There's not a lot of female representation in that side, so it's already down that path. And I hate that people do that. It sucks, because we could all share our opinions in a right way. You don't have to be rude about it. But then again, that's the risk that we all take with putting out content. Anybody can comment anything, which goes back to the whole free speech thing. It all circles together with things, but hopefully the comments chill out. But I understand. I mean, there's some people out there that just feed on that stuff. But either way, though, let's switch over to NASCAR discussion.
Let's do it.
We just got through with Atlanta. Interesting race. I caught the tail end of it. I didn't watch the first 200 laps. But with Atlanta, they've converted that over from a very rough track that was hard on tires, that you had multiple grooves, you had to move around, that a lot of drivers liked, example Kevin Harvick, now switching over to a super speedway style of racing where, yes, I could see from an entertainment perspective is good, but also you're taking away from these tracks that have had a historic, representation on the sport. So in your thoughts, is New Atlanta good or is New Atlanta bad for the sport?
Oh boy. So, I mean, I just go back to the last race that we had at the old Atlanta before we switched over to this new kind of configuration. We saw the track coming apart from our very eyes. We had to caution the race to fix some things. And maybe it was a red flag. It was one of the two. So the race had to be repaved at some point, or the track had to be repaved at some point, and then turn into, a reconfiguration. There seems to be a really big hype around super speedway racing for the fans. It can get messy, but you see all the highlight reels that we have for Daytona. It's all the crashes and wrecks, and that's how they advertise those races, and that's what's going to get the eyes. So when NASCAR decided to make that decision, in my mind, I'm like, that's actually really smart. Whether we get a good product or not the first few years as we're trying to work the track in, it's a good marketing opportunity to get people to watch. The product that we saw last year, I loved personally. I thought it was great. This year, I don't know if it was because of the colder temperatures that we had in Atlanta, that last weekend, that's going to produce a different product than what we're going to see in the summer for sure. But I don't know. The first two stages, you said you caught the tail end of it. You didn't miss much. Stages one and
that's
two,
what I've heard. I've heard the first half or the first, two stages were just like, whatever.
They were forgetful. I mean, and even Kyle Larson post-race interview after he wrecked out, or he was like, yeah, first two stages were boring. First half of the race was boring. And I'm like, if he thought it was boring, heck, for us fans out there, like,
right.
Yeah. But the last like 30, 40 laps after the Almirola caution were really exciting between Brad and Joey. And that, it won't redeem the whole race, but it was better. So it's really hard for me to say, John, like, that I like the new Atlanta, because I want to wait maybe 2 more years before I give a firm opinion on it. I don't know what you think about it. I don't know, since you've been around a little bit longer, you've seen more of the racing at the old Atlanta. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I love super speedway racing. My favorite track is Talladega. That was the first race I went to back in 2013 with my dad, or 2011 with my dad. Either way, we went twice. But it was the first track I've gone to, so I'm kind of biased towards super speedways.
That's all right.
I think it's good. I like it for the fact that whenever I kind of tying this over to just the general population outside of people who watch NASCAR, a lot of them are like, they want to see the wrecks. They want to see the big things happen. And you're right. From that perspective, it was a good move. From an entertainment value, sure. It's a good move because it's clean racing. I mean, well, to a point, because it's super speedways. I don't know how you could classify super speedways as clean. Because when they start going 3 wide, it just all goes, everywhere. Yeah. But having a super speedway style race in a 1.5 miles that's not as wide as a Talladega, I think it's a very interesting dynamic, because it's almost like what they were going to do, I guess still maybe doing with Auto Club Speedway, turning it into like a really long Martinsville, where it's, which I don't know if that's still in the plan. I know they just sold like 80% of the property over there. But I like it and I don't like it, because I like races that have strategy, and those kind of races where tire wear matters and the field gets spread out and it's a lot of strategy talk. But also then again, I like super speedways. So from a net gain perspective, I mean, we took away 1.5 miles to gain a super speedway where we have a ton of 1.5 miles on the schedule. So great. I guess it's more diversity from a track perspective, and it adds another destination where people can go to expect tight pack racing. So for me, I think the benefits outweigh the disadvantages of it. The big disadvantage, though, is, a lot of drivers were upset when they tore it up, which I was more along those lines when I first heard it, because I was like, do we really need another super speedway? But with the racing, like you said, I've liked it. I mean, I liked the very first race, because it was great. First or second race, because William Byron won it, and I'm a big Byron fan, so that was good for me. But after that, from a racing perspective, I think it's been really good. And like you said, the battle at the end of the race between Joey and Brad, that was, I mean, fantastic. I posted a video about that the same day, and it hit like 80,000 views or something on TikTok. So, and granted, people were like, I had to fast forward to the last 2 or 3 laps, because lap 6 through lap 3 were boring. And I was like, well, you didn't really miss much for the first 200 and whatever. But I think it's good. I think it's good for the sport. I think they can improve on it. I think with different, how the track plays out, that's the biggest thing in my thought when I think of this. Is it going to turn into another 1.5 miles once the grip starts going away from the track? Because I don't think they'll be able to run wide open, I guess not wide open, but I don't think they'll be able to run in packs forever. It's gonna give at some point. So when is that going to happen? I don't know. Is it always going to be that super speedway? Possibly, but I think it could possibly be where it's going to be almost like an in between a mile and a half and a super speedway, where you could have those packs, but you also could have a strung out race. I don't know. I mean, it's a big question mark because they've never done anything like that before. So yeah, we'll see.
Right. And it really does depend on which package, or if they decide to tweak the package there. Cause I know some drivers were like, maybe we just go back to like just a typical like mile and a half pack at this track.
Right.
We don't try to race a super speedway. So it depends. Based on that,
Right.
we're going to see some different racing. But then, as you said, as we work on the track, as things get figured out there, as we race there more, we're probably going to see something different. But yeah, overall, I'm okay with the track. I'm good with it. I am really excited for summer though, when the track is hot. I'm ready for the racing there. So
that it's gonna be a fun race to watch. It's gonna be filled with cautions. I feel like with just the temperature so high, I think it's just gonna be so slick. And I don't know what Goodyear is gonna do from a tire perspective, because they're gonna have to come up with something. Because in the heat of the summer in Atlanta, I mean, I'm in Nashville, it's hot, and so going down, I've been in Atlanta in the summer, it's hot. So, and it's always been one of those races where, outside of the race last week, it's been really, a slick track. So we'll see. But kind of mentioning a driver that you talked about, Brad K and RFK. So at Daytona, I made a statement with some of my racing colleagues. I was saying RFK is going to have a good year and they're going to be good everywhere. And they're like, oh no, they won't. They're going to have a good super speedway package. And I was like, I mean, I could see where you could say that 100%. And then here you have Brad Keselowski, the only driver to finish in the top 10 every single race this season, and should have won Daytona. Either him or Kyle Busch should have won Daytona.
Right.
Arguably, he could have won Atlanta if he was at the right place at the right time, but Logano made a good move, had a good push from LaJoie. So I think this could be Brad's year. I think this could be RFK's year. I mean, I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but looking at specifically where they're on the standings, I mean, Brad K's on a great run for just being in the points, and he's going to be right there at the end. So what is your thought on RFK? Are they going to be good everywhere? Are they going to keep the streak up? Is Chris Buescher going to come into the picture, all this stuff? What's your thought on RFK as a whole?
Well, here's the thing at Atlanta, Chris Buescher, he had, I think, a speeding penalty on pit road, and then he was able to race his way back into the top 10. And then he got caught in that wreck. It was either with the Chastain and Hamlin thing, or it was in the Almirola. He got caught up in one of those. And I was like, man, he could have had a solid top 10. But Brad consistently has been in the top 10 this whole season. And that is unlike it was last year. Granted, everything was new to him last year, going to RFK, team owner, driver. So I see things going really well for him this season. I really do. I predicted my preseason predictions that he would get 3 wins this year. Is that going to happen? No. I think that's bold.
That's I love it. I love it because I was under the same mindset. I was like, I think he's going to have a great year. It'd be good to see him win 3 races, no matter if you like him or you hate him, but it's good. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good. I was just going to say, like, my predictions this season, I was really weak last year when I made my 2022 preseason predictions. I went so easy on myself. I got almost everyone right. And I was like, what? These are supposed to be bold predictions for a reason. Let's just go crazy. So if he gets 3 wins, that's awesome. But if he doesn't, at least I tried. But I think he's going to have a solid points year. I know last year with that huge penalty, that 100 points penalty with I think the lug nuts on the car, or something like that. Something was wrong with the tires that hit him and RFK team. That put them in quite the hole this year. As long as they don't do that, I think he's set to be in the round of 16 for the playoffs. Easy peasy. So I'm excited to see where they end up.
I'm very excited to see their short track program because I was at the Bristol Fall race, and that's where you started. That's where you just started to see RFK turn around, and everybody was like, "Well, that's where Buescher won the race." I was going through my previous content, and I had him going up pit road. I have him doing a burnout going up pit lane victory lane into the victory circle. And yeah, at that race, we saw RFK do what a lot of people weren't expecting. And at that point, that's where it kind of caught my radar. I was like, okay, they figured something out. So, I mean, if we look at the upcoming schedule, you have Richmond coming up. I maybe either after COTA or 2 weeks from now, I can't remember. But you have Richmond, and what can they do at a short track? But like you said, 3 wins. I think that's actually kind of on the dot, because if you look at
All right.
Daytona, I mean, I think he was one of my picks for Daytona, and he
He
got
was for me too.
screwed.
Yeah.
So there was that. And then this past week, I picked him. I think I picked him, or I think I picked Brad K again, and he came up short. So I think he's going to be, once it gets closer to the playoffs, and once we go to Daytona again, and once we go, I guess, Atlanta.
Well, because here's the
depends.
thing. After Atlanta, or after Circuit of the Americas, sorry, we go to Richmond, Bristol, Martinsville, Talladega. Those are 4 good tracks that RFK has a chance to win.
He's going to win one of those. He's going to win one of those 4. Maybe not Bristol Dirt, but he'll win one of them, because it's with Talladega. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was thinking about going to Talladega. I totally forgot what date it was. I think it's like the 23rd. I may be totally wrong.
You got it.
But yeah, so great. That's a race that I think he's going to circle, that he's going to want to win, because he should have won at Daytona, or arguably should have won last week. And the thing is, it's not like he's just, hanging around, and then at the end of the race, he's going to the front. I mean, he's getting to the front and staying. Like, he's not moving unless something. Exactly. So I think RFK is going to have a good year. Now, road courses,
nope.
And there's other teams that are much better. I mean, I have some picks right now for that. We'll talk about that in the COTA preview, but that's not their strong suit, of course. But I think like we were talking about, short tracks and super speedways, I mean, last year they won Bristol. So I think you got to look at them as a favorite. I think he wins. I think he wins one of the next 4 or 5 at least, because he's going to have a strong run.
Agreed.
But yeah, so let's talk about, really quick, another topic. You have Ross versus Denny. So this thing that's been going on forever. And, we saw what happened at Phoenix, where Denny fully admitted on Dale Jr.'s podcast that I posted about, because I can't believe you would admit this. And then he gets slapped with the fine, that he just let the wheel go and took Ross with him. And I was like, go ahead. I mean, admit it. I mean, sure, you're throwing yourself under the bus. I mean, I guess you're being honest. I can admire that. But the discussion is, and I'm curious, because I don't know where I really lie on this. In your thought, is it good for the sport? Is it something that they should regulate, or should NASCAR just let it happen?
It sets a precedent. First off, his podcast Actions Detrimental is so good. It's a perspective that I think is needed by more drivers within the sport. So if more drivers want to be able to voice their opinions, I think that is great for the sport. What's not good for the sport, in my personal opinion, is every time somebody admits to fault, NASCAR puts a fine on it, especially if it's after the race, after the action's done. Usually, and I don't know prior precedent if somebody admits it after the race, if NASCAR slaps a fine on it, especially like the day after, I guess. So that was something a little bit different. But for Denny, I don't know, like you, why he said what he said. At least wait until the season's over, or wait until 2 races after, where NASCAR can't do anything about it.
Right. Yeah.
Right after is where I'm like, I don't know, but I think there is something to be said about controlling. NASCAR needs to make it clear, I should say, what is okay and what is not okay. Intentionally wrecking somebody is endangering other drivers, even if you're, as Denny said, he knew that they were going to finish in the back anyways. He didn't put any other cars in danger, but you could have. Same thing with the Byron and Hamlin incident. I know NASCAR didn't call it when they should have, but I think that they were right to fine Byron for that, because it was an intentional wreck under caution. There's certain rules under caution, right?
Yeah. You're right.
To me, it follows precedent, and it sets a precedent for when drivers admit on social media, on a podcast, what they do. So I think Denny Hamlin admitting it was not smart. I think constantly calling it out maybe on NASCAR hurts the entertainment value a little bit, and it keeps the drivers kind of in a cage onto what they can and cannot say. But right now, I think with the age of social media, we're trying to strike a balance. So I think this is the time where we're trying to figure that out.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think, it was, I mean, I watched it live, and I was like, he just didn't make
Oh,
any
yeah.
effort to turn in. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
the question that comes into my mind is, okay, what like you mentioned, what is that line?
Mhm.
Because okay, Byron wrecking Hamlin under caution, sure, agree.
Right.
Hamlin wrecking Ross at the end of the race, okay, that's more along the lines of what's. I mean, it's definitely in danger when he said he let go of the wheel, sure,
Right.
but this brings up the discussion in my head. Okay, what happens if you're racing at the end of the race and you spin a guy for a win?
Exactly.
What's the line? What's the line? Because are you going to say that's acceptable? I mean, he technically wrecked him. I mean, you obviously, if anybody wrecks somebody for a win and gets into the back of him, I mean, look at what Dale Earnhardt used to do.
Right. Even last season,
Then
Ty
okay.
Gibbs and Brandon Jones.
That's
That's a whole different thing.
that's a whole different thing that
We're
I
not even
was
going to
not
touch it,
happy.
but just as an
Yeah.
example.
You're right. Yeah. So what's okay? And I think that's something that should be displayed because I mean, as somebody who's been in racing or watched racing since I was a kid, so many disciplines, racing, go-karts at a mini golf place or racing go-karts at a K1 speed or racing on iRacing or whatever it may be. It's kind of obvious that if you're leading, especially on an oval or whatever, not even oval, I'll just open it up for any kind of race outside of, I guess, Formula One. I guess you could move somebody out of the way. But if you move somebody out of the way, that considered acceptable race practice? And where does that lie? I mean, does that lie on the okay side? Yeah, you can, because everybody knows when you get into the back of somebody at the end of the race and you win the race and he's off into the wall, yeah, you intentionally wrecked him so you could get the win.
Mm-hmm.
So like, do they find that? Do they suspend? I mean, like that's the thing is like, what's okay? Because granted, I think this is just an entirely different sports take, but I think sports in general, the officials have gotten too into it and have
Yep.
made the sports very, I shouldn't say, I'll say soft. I guess it's the best way to put it. Like they're calling things that I don't think they should have. So
kind of micromanaging a little bit is how it feels.
Exactly. So my question is, what's the line? Because yeah, if you run into the back of somebody going for a win and they go into the wall, example, Ty Gibbs and Brandon Jones, I mean, what's the line? Because I mean, technically, like you said, you're putting a driver in danger.
Mm-hmm.
You intentionally did not let off the gas or whatever it may be. You got into his corner panel and wrecked him.
Mm-hmm.
Just like what Denny did. You may not have let go of the wheel, but you're doing the same thing. So what's the line? That's my thing. What's the line? Because I've always been like, okay, you know the risk if you're out front and somebody's
Right.
behind you, you're going to get dumped. I mean, that's just kind of a general racing. I'm not going to call it etiquette. I'm not going to call it etiquette, but I guess it can be etiquette in a way. Not good etiquette, but people do it. I mean, it could happen. So that's my thing. Like, what's the line? I mean, I think it's good for the sport. I think it's good that we have rivalries. I mean, look at Byron and Logano, and that brings up a whole other discussion. Whether Byron really forced Logano into the wall at Darlington. I'm along the lines where I think it was a little bit close, but then Logano goes and puts Byron in the wall. It's kind of expected. Like as a Byron fan, I knew what Joey was going to do.
Oh, yeah.
Byron's race was ruined, but he didn't get fined, or Denny does when he says he let go of the wheel. So is it a matter of saying something versus not?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's a matter of saying something versus not. You'll have drivers that'll just kind of be like, I don't know if I did or I didn't, and they won't get fined, but it's kind of clear to the fan at home based off of either the narrative that's been told during the broadcast or what we see with our own eyes, what happens. But it's innocent until proven guilty at this point.
Sure. Makes sense.
NASCAR really just needs to sit down and figure out what is the precedent, because then you hear the whole thing, oh, it was just a racing deal. And you're like, all right, so then what is a racing deal versus it's that line? So
is that line, yeah.
And I'd be interested to hear a driver's perspective on this that's been through this or has had a personal situation with this, and hear their thought about where the line is and where NASCAR should govern it. Because as a fan, I don't know if I should sit here and say, here's how NASCAR should govern their sport, but it's more so like, maybe make that line more clear to us fans at home and to the driver so we can avoid the, for me, unnecessary drama of this guy shouldn't have gotten fined. That's ridiculous. Or just having less cooks in the kitchen, opinion wise, is my thought, even though I think opinions are great when you're trying to penalize somebody or punish somebody for an action that they did that endangers other drivers, you can't let those opinions, I think, seep in that much. It's a decision. Your hand, force the hand, then there you go.
No, I agree. I'm right there with you, because it's a matter of what's is it racing or is it entertainment, and what's the line? Because that's one of the biggest things I think NASCAR is battling right now is, entertainment.
Right. And I don't blame them. And I don't, God, I wouldn't want to be in their shoes. And I think as fans too, we don't realize how tough that is. They deal with this on a case by case basis. Though they try to follow prior precedent in the moment, they might make the wrong decision and maybe later admit maybe that wasn't right. But you're balancing so much at once. And if you know, like the behind the scenes of sports production, sports management, broadcasting, and how that all works, it's difficult. So I cut NASCAR some slack on that end. But yeah, it's maybe having a discussion and figuring out where that line is, because in recent years, it's been happening more and more and more.
It is.
So
Yeah. But I think as long as nobody gets hurt and everybody's safe, which that's a whole other topic, is are these cars safe? But I think they've done as of late, they've done a better job outside of the clash. I mean, I think it's every time that I've gotten in a car, gotten in a race, and I am leading, or I see somebody that's in the lead and they get dumped. I mean, it's just precedent that it's going to happen. It's possible, whether it's on a sim or in real life. I mean, it's just, you're going to get moved out of the way if the guy behind you has a chance to move you, or girl, or whoever it may be. It's just a matter of, but I think within the rivalry perspective, that's something that we haven't seen a lot of. I mean, there's been rivalries here and there. I mean, I know as a Jeff Gordon fan, now William Byron fan, when Jeff completely ruined Clint Boyer's race at Phoenix, that was a big thing, and nothing. I mean, I don't remember really if anything came from that. And so it's just like, I think these rivalries are good. I really do. Yeah. And I think it does provide the entertainment value, but also, what sport doesn't have rivalries is the whole, as a whole take there. Like, I think it's good to have that competitive edge. And even after the race, I saw a clip 2 days ago where it was Ross and Denny talking after the race at Phoenix, and they were just chatting it up like they were friends. And I was like, yeah, obviously it's fine. I mean, like at that's where I'm like, okay, what should have NASCAR done? Should they really have fined Denny? I mean, he did say he let go of the wheel, which you should never say you let go of the wheel. But at the end of that, if they could talk it over and they're fine, let it be, let it just back off, because then you're getting to a point of, okay, are you dictating the sport too much? Are you kind of,
it's that balance.
Yeah.
For sure.
It is. So we could talk about rivalries all day long. It'd be a fun podcast there. But looking at what we got going on this weekend, so the first road course of the season, going down to Texas, Circuit of the Americas. I'm very excited for this race because we have a lot of things happening at COTA. So as we speak, there is, I think, Cup practice that is technically being broadcast, but they've already gone through Cup practice. We'll talk on that just a little bit. But some things that they have changed for this specific race. They are going to have no cautions at the end of stages. So with one of my most recent videos on TikTok, I mentioned that they should eliminate the cautions at the end of stages. So, I did not know that prior to looking at COTA's rules. I did not know that was a thing. So I like that. I think it's a good thing because, obviously bunching up the field is going to create the excitement and everything, but testing this out, I think it's going to be a good test to see, okay, what's going to be produced with the racing? Like, is there going to be drivers playing on the short-term strategy of trying to finish in the front of stages to get more stage points versus drivers playing the strategy of trying to win the race? I think those are two very different strategies in that. So I'm curious, what do you think about that specific aspect of what's going to happen this race? No cautions at the end of stages. They'll just remain green and keep on going.
So first off, my preseason predictions, I thought that they were going to get rid of stage cautions in January. I was right. I love to say I'm right. That's something I was right about. So at least one of my predictions is good so far. But something I think is going to be interesting is we saw varying strategies though with the stage breaks. Did teams try to just short pit the stage? Did they try to just, pit when you're supposed to? Did they go too long for pits? This time, I think without the stage breaks, we're not going to see that much varying strategy because if there's a fuel window, everyone's going to pit. I think during that fuel window, it all depends on if we get random cautions during this race, which I think we might. I mean, we have some different drivers in the field this weekend. Granted, they're pros. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but it's going to depend on the cautions and where they fall this weekend. But I am excited to see how the flow of the racing works. Now, if this rule is going to carry over to other races in the future, I don't know. I believe what's correct about this is they are keeping like the stage points, but they're not like doing a stage break. So they're keeping the stages. They're just not throwing the yellow for it. And I actually really like that idea because it keeps the incentive to keep going towards the front during those timed laps or during that lap period where they are counting the points. So, so stage without breaks, I like that a lot. I think it can produce some excitement, but I am concerned that there might actually be a lack of strategy as opposed to more strategy at play here.
Interesting. See, I think kind of the opposite on that, because I think you're going to have a wide array of different drivers trying to do different things. Like you may have a driver or a car and a team who may not win the race, but they'll try to get as many stage points as they can. Therefore, a team that may want to try to win the race to get themselves in the playoffs, maybe on a differing strategy because they know that they can afford to give up those stage points. I think it's going to be interesting to see who does what, because like you said, obviously everybody has a fuel window, but then again, you could short pit on the front end to where your last stint, and I don't know the fuel window because I don't know how long COTA is offhand. But within that, could we see some drivers pit within the first 5-10 laps, short pit the first stage, and then just try to, if there are no cautions, but there's going to be cautions, it's going to happen. Right. What they will do, I think it could be interesting to see what could happen on that perspective. Like, who are the cars that typically aren't out front at road courses going to be there at the end of the stages that give stage points? And then you have to think about that. Okay, are the teams that are typically good at road courses, are they okay with giving up those stage points, knowing that they could possibly have a chance to win the race and move themselves in the playoffs? A good driver that is a very strong, what's the word? A strong driver that represents, I think, that strategy well is Tyler Reddick. So Reddick's, I mean, with him winning at, was it Road America?
Road America last year, yeah.
Yeah. When he won at Road America, and with him being as strong as he is on road courses, and he was the fastest in practice, what does he do? Because that's a driver that I'm going to look at this weekend and say, okay, is he going to try to get maximum stage points? Because he's been good, but he's also been.
It's been a little rough of a season.
Yeah. So what does he do? Does he try to get more stage points to bump him up in overall points to potentially have those points going into the playoffs, or does he play for the win? I don't know. I think it's going to be a very different race that we haven't seen before, because there are the stage points being allocated to the drivers without the break. Because, this goes back to before we even had stages, where it was all cumulative points at the end of the season. Whoever had the most points won, or I guess technically they had to chase. But, this kind of plays into both. You have to worry about points. You have to worry about a win, but you're also racing to 3 different points to maximize your point total. So I don't know what these teams are going to do from strategy. It makes my head hurt trying to figure out what they're going to do.
We don't get paid to do this.
We don't. I would love to. So NASCAR, if you want to listen, I would love to get a spot on a team. I don't know if you have any open charters left. I don't have the money for it, but I'll drive. Yeah, that's one rule that's going into effect. No breaks at the end of stage. At the end of the stages. Another rule that's going into effect is the restart zone is going to go back to the 2022 dimensions. I mean, that's one hand to the other. I think it's a restart zone. I mean,
drivers didn't see benefit from it. Drivers had told NASCAR they didn't see benefit from it, or they didn't see what they wanted to see that extended restart zone hopefully provide them. So going back to it, no harm, no foul. We tried it for 5 races, which we're already 5 races in. That blows my mind a little bit. But yeah, going back to
me too.
it's fine. Yeah. It's wild. So yeah.
I think it's one of those things. Yeah. It's like I mean, I guess, we'll see how that plays into effect. I guess on road courses, it could be a little bit different because where they're coming out of the last corner, the field could stack up in a little bit of a different way if it was a longer or if it was extended restart zone.
And here's the thing there. Part of me almost thinks maybe we should have tried the extended restart zone at all the different track types and then decided what it did. Because it could be more of a benefit at road courses and maybe the short tracks than it was what we saw at the intermediates and super speedways.
Right, because they only extended it by just a little bit. But I think like you said, a road course, it'd be interesting to see what that does. Just an extra. Yeah. I can't. Was it like 50 feet or something like that?
They said they extended it by 50%.
50%. Okay, so probably I'm assuming 25 on the front, 25 on the back. I would guess. Or maybe however they would allocate that. But I mean, I guess that's a big percentage outside of 50 feet because like 50 feet is not a lot. So yeah, I like that idea where you just put it at all tracks. Cause I mean, technically, we haven't gone to a short track yet outside of the Coliseum, but we're not going to count that one. No. So I'd be curious to see what happens, but either way, restart zones going back to the original dimensions. But what's going to happen for the first time is going to be the choose rule. Mm-hmm. That's going to cause some chaos because what do you do? Like the choose rule is always a fun thing, but at a road course, it really matters where you start, especially at COTA going into turn 1. You have 2 different strategies, at least from if I'm trying to put my driver's helmet on. Do I want to be on the inside to where I could basically almost dive bomb around whoever's in front of me? Or do I want to be on the outside, get a wide sweeping turn? Hopefully nobody gets into my door and I could get a nice drive off. What do you do? Like what is your thought on the choose rule at a road course?
I think it's going to make things a lot more interesting. And the choose rule in general, in my opinion, has helped play to the driver's strengths on restarts. If you are a horrible restarter, the thing that you can at least give yourself is starting in the lane that you prefer. When originally you might not have had that option, maybe you would have gotten lucky as to how you got out on pit road and you're like, well, I start better on the inside lane at this track. Great. Here we go. But if you don't, at least you have the option to go to the outside. So it's going to depend on how you like to race those restarts on the road courses. And I think it gives the drivers a really good option. And it'll help some drivers out for sure, I think.
I do too. I think it's going to be very interesting to see who goes where, and specifically a couple drivers that I'm going to pay attention to is Trackhouse, where they go, because they're the king. I mean, they led 46 laps last year. Ross Chastain moved 2 cars out of the way to win. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. But other than that, from a rule change and a tire perspective and things going into the race, the Cup cars will run the same tire codes that were used on road courses all last season. That's just tires, fun stuff. They said in the event of a lost wheel that is contained on pit road, the offending team will be subject to a pass-through penalty under green flag conditions. That is going to be mayhem because losing time on a road course, time is everything, really. And like on a 1.5 miles or a super speedway, you have a chance. And I guess you could say with a longer road course, if you're one of the only cars that's a lap down, sure. But then again, having to do a pass through under green, it's just terrible. But it says if it's under caution, though, the offending team will have to start at the tail end of the field, which could happen. I mean, we see typically one. We've seen kind of one every race. So who's it going to be this week? But we'll see what happens. Other than that, there's a couple other different tire notices about a wheel breaking on pit road. It says if a wheel breaks free outside of pit road, the new rules guidelines mandate a 2-lap penalty plus a 2-race suspension for 2 crew members. I want to know your take on this, because I've always been baffled by the whole suspending a team because a tire goes away, like rolls away. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's too harsh to suspend team members because the tire rolling out? Or do you think it's not harsh enough? Or do you think it's appropriate?
A lot of that depends on history, because there was one race at some point, and the history buffs out there need to help me out. but wasn't it like a rogue tire and it like got into like the audience and like didn't it was dangerous, something like that. Something like that happened at some race somewhere.
That rings a bell. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel like it's another safety concern thing where it's NASCAR assuring themselves for the what if situations, which for any business you have to do that. So
Yeah.
for this, I do think 2 races is really harsh. I think a suspension might be a little too harsh for a loose wheel, but you also know if something were to go terribly wrong, the consequence is going to be way worse than a 2-race suspension. So
Oh yeah.
you're having to weigh it out. If anything, maybe do like almost like the monetary fine type thing again, like 10,000, 5,000. I don't know what it is, but I think I do honestly think the 2-race suspension is a little too harsh. Honestly.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Because there could be a multitude of reasons why a tire could go off a pit road. And I could see, obviously, like you were saying in NASCAR's terms, trying to cover themselves. Let's say a tire rolls free, it hits a car, it goes airborne, it bounces into the stands. I mean, those tires weigh close to 100 pounds, I believe. And if that hits somebody, I mean, unless you're Arnold Schwarzenegger in the stands and you can just catch the tire, you're going to get severely injured by a tire. So I can understand it, but from suspension, I think where that could be changed to a monetary fine, I'm right there with you. Because I mean, that I feel like a monetary fine would be even worse because you like, especially if it's a crew member. I mean, these crew members aren't making a boatload of money. So I guess something like a $5,000 or $10,000 fine would be a very hefty deal. But I guess from 2 races, I guess they just wouldn't participate. I guess not get pay. I don't know how that works. I don't know if the teams would still technically pay them if they're suspended. I don't know. I do like the monetary thing though. That's a good point.
I think what they did last year though, when they had the monetary fine for it, I think was too harsh. However much they made you pay after that last year was too harsh. But no, well, wasn't it? It was like a 4-race suspension, wasn't it? If you lost a tire last year.
Yeah, I think it was 4.
Yeah. So at least they've cut back on it. They've changed some things, which I appreciate, but still need to probably revisit it. I like, again, the monetary fine. I feel like when a team is handed a monetary fine right then and there, you lose a tire and you're like, oh, there goes $10,000. That stings a little bit more. So maybe teach a lesson in the moment.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because I mean, you're with 2 crew members. I'm not saying crew members are replaceable, but you could let's say it happens to a team like Hendrick. I mean, with as many crew guys and as many team members as they have across multitudes of series outside of just NASCAR, what they do from any kind of motorsport, they could find people. On all that stuff. So speaking of suspensions and speaking of fines, after the race at Phoenix, apparently competition officials issued a safety violation for the loss or separation of an improperly installed tire wheel. This got very robotic. From the vehicle of section 8.8.10.4 A and C to the number 10 of Eric Almirola. Crew members Ryan Mulder, the right front tire changer, and Sean Cotton, the jack, were suspended 2 races. So there's that suspension that's in place. But I think where I was not intentionally going, but I know where you were going with fines and whatnot. I believe you were referring to the what happened with Hendrick and the louvers. Is that what you were going to say? Okay, I'll go ahead. Take it away.
So we were on that money process and talking about Hendrick and the fines thing. So I guess in general, Hendrick still has their crew chiefs out, Byron, Bowman, Larson. The hood louvers were confiscated from their cars. Same penalty for Justin Haley at Colleague. NASCAR didn't like how they looked. They said that it was not the manipulation. That's not the word I want to use, but it was messing with a single sourced part, which you're not supposed to do. Hendrick basically was like, we had to, this didn't fit the car right. We had to mess with it. NASCAR's like, yeah, but no. Same rules kind of applied to the RFK penalty that happened last year with Brad. And so, I mean, for me, again, talking about precedent earlier, this is precedent. But that was a huge monetary fine. I think according to NASCAR, the biggest fine for a team like in one sitting. So each one was fined $100,000 of Byron, Bowman, Larson. Crew chief suspended for 4 races. penalty for points, like point stock, and really screwed them over. So going to be recovering from that. And obviously, I think if we're going to start looking at maybe some race winning picks this weekend too, who we think might do well. I mean, I'd look at Larson. Larson's going to win at some point this season and lock himself into the round of 16. Cause at this point they have to, because they're so far down in points. I think Larson at least has a chance this weekend to make it up right away. But yeah, something to look out for and keep in mind as we're talking about Hendrick Motorsports in the next, well, I guess the rest of the season, is that they have a points hole that they're going to have to dig themselves out of.
Exactly. Unless you're William Byron, which he got very lucky winning 2 races. As a Byron fan, he's been, and it's very odd statistically, all of his wins have come in the first 5 races of every single year that he's been in the Cup Series. And outside, I mean, this is race number 5. I'm not having him anywhere near my picks for this weekend because he's not really a road course guy. But for him, obviously it hurts, but he's already locked in. But for a driver like Bowman, who's close, for Larson, who's close, let's exclude Chase Elliott out of this because he technically isn't a part of it at the moment. But yeah, it hurts because you have the crew chief fines and the crew chief suspensions. You have the team, now it's under scrutiny from NASCAR, which I don't know if you saw the video of where Chad Canals basically came out and was like, NASCAR gave us these parts and then said that they were wrong, even though it was the parts that they gave us, or that it was a supplier that they used. And in my head, I'm just trying to make logical sense, taking all of my Hendrick bias out of this. If somebody gives somebody a part and it's not right, and they try to change it to make it right, and then the team that tries to make it right with the part that was originally wrong gets fined,
who's in the wrong?
Like, it's a head scratcher. Like, I mean, yes, they technically were against code. They altered a part, but then again, if the part was truly wrong from the get-go, do you not want them to race with louvers on the hood? Like, what do you want them to do?
And it's like, also asking about the communication leading up to that. Was there like proper and upfront communication with NASCAR as the issue? And that's something that I don't think the outside folks that are not the teams are going to know. But who it really hurts is Justin Haley, colleague. They're not a Hendrick powerhouse. And that sucks for him because he's having such a good, I think, a decent season so far. And his road course, I mean, you always look at AJ Allmendinger to do great, and I think he'll do great this weekend. With Justin Haley, I don't necessarily fully see him as the best road course racer, and I could be remembering this wrong, but as we go through these next few weeks and knowing that he's so good at super speedways, but we're going to some short tracks right after COTA. I don't know if he's going to be able to make up this deficit. I mean, definitely, I don't think he's going to be in the round of 16. I'm not saying that, but I at least expected him to be top 20 in points, and now I don't know.
Yeah, it sucks for Haley because he's always up there at super speedways, and I always, if there's just looking at odds, when I look at early in the week odds, he's always at the bottom of the list, and I'm like, what? Just put something on him because he's always up there. But like you said, he was, and we'll get into this. We'll actually talk about this next, kind of what's going on with practice. This ties into that topic that just happened today at COTA. He was all the way back in 34th out of 39. Yeah. Like he's not right up there. Yeah. And looking at AJ Allmendinger was 18th. Okay. He's going to be in the front. He's one of my first sure picks. But like you said, for an AJ Allmendinger, he's an aggressive driver. He's not scared to put his car on the line. He's in a full-time gig now with Colleague, and he's good at road courses. I mean, he arguably should have won last year at COTA. Right. And he won last year at Road America. And I guess he won last year at COTA in the Xfinity Series. So, he's going to be there. He's not going to be affected by the penalty, hopefully too much, because he's definitely the stronger of the two drivers by like loads. I think now from super speedway perspective, I like Haley a little bit more. But I think, let's talk about that. Let's talk about going into this weekend, what we've seen so far, and kind of give you a preview for what's coming up this weekend. So practice just happened today, and Tyler Reddick, no surprise, at the top of the board, followed by Larson, Ross Chastain, Kyle Busch, and Daniel Suarez. So top 5, you're looking at both Trackhouse guys who both led a combined 46 laps last year, who won at Sonoma, who won at COTA. It's hard not to pick them because they're so good.
Right.
And so looking down through the field, you have Michael McDowell, who's a surprisingly good road course racer.
Yeah, everyone leaves him
I,
out. Never leave him
I,
out.
I don't know what the live odds on Michael are, but I may actually sprinkle a little bit on just for fun, just to see what he does, because he was up there last year.
He was.
At COTA, and so looking down through it, Austin Cendric is in seventh, Bubba Wallace in eighth, Joey Logano in ninth, and then something that we are 100% going to talk about because I've been waiting to bring this up. IMSA driver, now Hendrick driver, Jordan Taylor, 10th in practice, 8.35 or 0.835 tenths off of Tyler Reddick, probably, if not one of the best road course racers in the field. So, question, Taylor, on Jordan Taylor. Can Jordan Taylor what's your thoughts? Can he finish in the top 10? Can he maybe surprise people and finish in the top 5? I'm just throwing random things around. What's your thought on Jordan Taylor?
Well, clearly not in a NASCAR Cup car, but he's won at Circuit of the Americas before. This is not a foreign track to him. He's
exactly
good. He's really good at this. Obviously, like you said, and as is well known, really good at road courses. I think he has a great shot at finishing in the top 10. He's worked with the Garage 56 cars, kind of being being a driver's coach and things like that for that team. He's not going to actually be in the car. He's kind of a backup reserve driver, but he's been working with it. So he gets a little bit of layout of these Gen 7 cars already. So it doesn't surprise me that he did decently in practice with the knowledge that he has on this track as well. So I mean, for me, I do the NASCAR fantasy lineup each week. He's going to be
I do too.
in the garage pick. Yeah. He's going to be in my garage for that. I don't know if I want to put him in my top 5 necessarily, but I also think if you did, you will not be in the wrong.
I would say just keep him in the garage because, you're going to fill up a spot. I guess we're just talking strategy now because I'm in it too. I would say use him because he's only going to be in this race this year. I think this is the only chance to be in a cup car out. I think it will be. Just use them now because are you using it on the NASCAR fantasy or the actual NASCAR fantasy app or the NASCAR app with the fantasy thing? Yeah. So, I mean, you can only use a driver 10 times. He's only going to be in a cup. Yeah. Use it now. And so I think he has a great chance. I'm looking at live odds. He's currently a little bit higher than midway. He's about, let me just some rough math, 10. Yeah, he's right there with Martin Truex Jr., Chris Buescher, Chase Briscoe, Christopher Bell, Denny Hamlin, about plus 2,500. Obviously, the favorite to win is Tyler Reddick, followed by Kyle Larson, Ross Chastain, Kyle Busch, and somehow William Byron's up there in 5th, even though his practice effort was horrendous.
Yeah.
He was all the way. I shouldn't say horrendous. He was 16th. But looking at through the rest of the field, just a couple things that I notice right off the bat. Like I mentioned before, AJ Allmendinger is in 18th. I don't think that's any worry because last year, if I'm not mistaken, let me pull up my stats because I was doing some statistics with my picks. It looks like, Chastain started 16th in the field and won the race. So you could start back there. Obviously, this is not qualifying, but you could start all the way there and still win the race. What's your thoughts on Allmendinger this weekend?
I mean, road course bringer in the Xfinity series, you expect him to bring that same quality to the cup cars. He's done well in cup at the road courses as well. As you said, very close to a win last year, got booted last minute. He is a driver at the road courses like we see with Chase Elliott, who won't be in the field this weekend due to injury. He's able to work his way back up. It doesn't matter what you throw at him. He's able to get to the front of the pack at a road course and stay there if everything goes according to plan. He has good odds finishing in the top 10, though, like we talked about with Michael McDowell, he's been somebody we haven't had our eyes on, and he could be somebody who also finishes inside the top 10. As we run more road courses, more drivers start to figure it out. So overall, think he'll do well. It's just a matter of who's starting to figure it out too.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, looking at a couple drivers too that are ahead of him, I mean, you have Ty Gibbs. He was 11th in practice.
Great road course racer.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, you saw what he did in the Xfinity series. And then just kind of looking through, these are obviously, I'm still sticking with my 5 original picks, which I have not mentioned, but my 5, I guess I'll just say them now. My 5 picks to potentially win the race this weekend, it's both of the Trackhouse guys. You just you can't not put something on them, or at least have them in your lineup. I have Cindric. That was my number 3.
Easy.
And then with Allmendinger in 4, and I'm trying to figure out where my 5th driver was. I don't see him. I can't remember who it was. I don't know if you watched my video. Maybe you did. I don't really remember who my last driver was. This sucks because I can't remember. Allmendinger, Chastain. I think it was Blaney.
Oh,
I think
okay.
I think it was Blaney. And I think it was Blaney because I went on the whole thing of where he started on the pole last year.
That's true.
Also, I could have just looked at my screen because I literally have it right there. Right. I totally forgot. So looking at how you're getting an insight into how I specifically look at betting purposes. I look at the previous races. Now I look at history of NASCAR, like who's done well at specific tracks, but I kind of have to exclude that a little bit and solely focus on the next gen car because it's totally different. Right. So last year, whenever the race to Chastain won, I guess it was the only race at COTA. Blaney finished in 6th. I technically booted him up to 5th because Chase Elliott finished in 4th. So eliminate him from the field if you bump everybody up in position for that. Blaney technically finished in the top 5, but Blaney had the most stage points.
Yes,
that race, and he did, and he also won the pole. That's why I put him in my picks, because looking at this, I've put money on him this season and he's just broken my heart, and I hate it. But I think it's going to come. Yes, it's sad, but I think that this could be a race where he not only plays for points, but he plays for the win, because when you have drivers like the typicals up there in the front, you have Reddick, you have Chastain, you have Suarez, Blaney needs to have a good finish. He needs to have something. I mean, he finished 2nd at Phoenix, so I guess that's a good finish. But I think for a confidence perspective, he's got to win something. I think this could be a race where he starts. Well, I mean, he was 12th in qualifying, or 12th in practice, so he may be able to work his way up in qualifying to a good starting position. But I'm looking at him to have a really good day. A driver that I did not put any kind of consideration to was Alex Bowman, who had 8 points. He finished 2nd. So I mean, Bowman's good. I don't know exactly where he sat in practice. I'm trying to find him right now. He's at 20th. It's just, it's hard. It's hard with Bowman because he's good. He could stay up front, but he can't really seem to get the job done from what I've at least seen.
For what I will say for Alex Bowman, at least, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, you're fine.
At least this season he's been consistent. I mean,
true. He has.
Yeah. I believe he has the most top 10 finishers, or the most consecutive top 10 finishes this season, or is at least one of those drivers. And something that I think Bowman has struggled with in the past is consistency. So at least having the season start off well, that's great. But he's, and this is going to be so vague and like, it's going to sound so stupid, but when he's good, he's good. When he's not, he's not. The times where he's bad kind of outweighs the time where you're like, oh wow, Alex Bowman towards the front. He's kind of a driver we forget about. And when it's Hendrick Motorsports, you're forgetting about one of their drivers. Not the best thing.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I mean, with the point penalty, like what we mentioned earlier, it's just going to be harder for that team to
I'm nervous for
get up to the front, because I mean, he can win. I mean, he has no issue winning races. He could do it. But I think it's just going to be a matter of where. I mean, I think a good track that he could possibly win at, that he's won at before, was Dover. I mean, I think he could definitely have a good run there. Also, I just noticed, if not 1, but 2 Alex Bowman helmets in the background. I can't tell about the right one, but I know the left one is definitely an Alex Bowman. Or is that Jimmy Johnson? That's not Jimmy Johnson's ally helmet, is it?
It's Jimmy. I wanted a Jimmy Johnson helmet so bad, and this is the only one I could find. So I got this one that doubles as Bowman, and that my Blaney helmet right here, body armor.
Okay, it looks a little bit pink and okay, I gotcha. Okay, there we go. There we go. Got it. Got it.
Got a 12 right.
You got Blaney. Got it. You got the Funko Pops on the back. I have yet to find. I've tried to find them without looking online for NASCAR Funko Pops. They're hard to find.
Oh yeah.
From my experience. But yeah, with Bowman, I couldn't add him on my slate because, like you said, when he's good, he's really good. But when he's bad, he's really bad. And I think he'll be up there. I think he'll be in the discussion. I mean, 100%. But there are some other drivers that I think could definitely take precedent. Now,
Right.
I don't know who you have on your list to make it, but I did not have Tyler Reddick and I did not have Christopher Bell, who Reddick finished 5th and Bell, well, I guess technically 5th, and Bell finished 3rd. So who's your slate of a few drivers? Because I pick 5 every week. Who's your slate of maybe whoever you decide to choose to possibly bring it home this weekend at COTA? I'm curious.
So, like I said, keep an eye out for Jordan Taylor. I don't think he'll win the whole thing at all. But I think he'll do well. Drivers who I think could potentially win it, though, I'm leaving out Tyler Reddick as well for the fact that, I still want to make sure he's able to do well in this Toyota equipment. He's not a Chevy anymore. I know he was able to do well at the road courses in that. And here, this is showing promise. But when it comes time to the race and do the whole thing, is it all going to add up? Kyle Larson, he's always really good at road courses. He has a history of being well at road courses. Sometimes doesn't work in his favor, but I think this weekend I can see him doing well, redeeming himself after, the penalties that the team has endured. So there's that. Definitely Trackhouse guys. You'd be crazy not to put them in any lineup that you have if you're betting. Those 2 guys. So I'm at 3 guys right now. Who else are we looking at? I think potentially Cindric. I'm going to go with Cindric as well. Great in Xfinity at road courses. He's done well Cup. Him. And then I feel like I need to look down through the field for a little bit because part of me wants to go with something a little bold, but maybe not too bold.
As long as it's not Jimmy Johnson.
Oh no,
I gotta say.
We love Jimmy Johnson, but the guy,
I know
gosh. Makes me sad. But I think I'm maybe not going to go too far from the top 10 here. I'm probably going to put Kyle Busch in there. Honestly.
Yeah.
He's caught my eye at the road courses the past few years. And granted, again, maybe not a driver that you're like, Kyle Busch is fantastic at road courses. He doesn't come to my mind first, but he's always in the mix. And he's done great with this RCR equipment so far, always in contention for the win most weekends that we've had so far. So let's see what he does at a road course. So that's 5.
I want to second that because I've made this point earlier in the year regarding Kyle Busch in an RCR car. He took over Reddick's equipment.
Yep.
So it's not like that team has forgotten how to run road courses.
Exactly.
Busch was 4th in practice. Granted, Reddick was a full half second faster than everybody.
Yeah.
Just because he's Reddick. But looking at the number 8 of Kyle Busch, I picked him to win at Auto Club because Reddick got wrecked by Byron the year prior, and Reddick was 100% the fastest car. And I was like, let's look at that. And lo and behold, look at what happened. I think Busch is a very, 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 very smart pick. And looking where he stands in everything, he is has the fourth, I guess technically highest odds. He is at a plus 800, right behind Reddick, Larson, and Chastain. So the books are on him too. I think it's a very solid pick. I don't even think he could definitely finish in the top 3. Oh, yeah. I'll be looking at him to be in the mix of things, mainly because if not his road course skill, but just the car. He'll just be in good equipment. Oh, yeah. And why not? With Reddick finishing, if you take Chase Elliott out of it, Reddick technically finishing 4th last year. Yeah, why not? So a couple other drivers that I think just looking through the top 10 of last year's finish kind of surprised me. You have Eric Jones. He was finished 9th, who Eric Jones is 14th in practice. So that's a driver I want to pay attention to. And then Austin Dillon? I think it was Austin Dillon. Yeah, Austin Dillon is sitting, I'm going past 25th.
He didn't do that
this is not
great.
Good.
No, yeah. He's towards the back.
Yeah. So
30th.
That's a lot to make up at a road course with no stage breaks. And that's the biggest thing is with no stage breaks this time around, how is that going to shake up the field? Because, you don't, unless there's a caution with their very well maybe they're, I'm trying to say there's going to be a caution. Yeah. So where are these drivers going to be at the end of the day when we don't have those 2 additional cautions that we typically would at stages? So it's a big question. It's a big question
for sure
that we have, but we have a couple exciting things going on. So qualifying is taking place depending on when you listen to this, because I'm hopefully going to upload this in full tonight. Depending on when this goes out, qualifying is at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow. It is an impound qualifying session, and then the race is going to take place at 2:30 Eastern time on Sunday. I'm curious. Are you going to watch the truck in the Xfinity Series race, or are you just going to stick to the Cup for this weekend?
Depending on the scheduling of my life, I probably will try to watch all the racing. It always, if you're really invested in the sport, and also even if you just want to go into reporting for the sport too, if you're on the media side of things, watching truck in Xfinity is essential. It gives you an idea of what you're going to see for Cup. So I like to watch it just to do my research, just to do a little bit of just digging to see what we can expect for Sunday. And also Xfinity and truck have some great storylines too. I mean, throwing it back just off topic for a second, but the Josh Williams stuff that happened last weekend.
Oh my goodness.
Like, you don't really get that in Cup necessarily every weekend. So that's
going to be it's the biggest. I think that will be the biggest story of the year, because just think that if you're a total outsider to motorsports and you hear of a driver literally parking his car at the start finish line under caution and get out and just walk across. I'm getting so excited. I hit my mic, and you get, that's something you don't see. I mean, think about this. If it was Formula One and it was a safety car and you see, I don't know. I mean, I'm not big into the Xfinity. I don't know what Josh Williams has done. I know he drives for DGM, but I don't know where he stands. I mean, I know he's not the best Xfinity driver, but I know he's not the absolute worst. So thinking about this in Formula One terms, let's say somebody in Formula One literally just parked their car, whoever it may be, in the back of the field, and just completely just left and walked away, and you just have a car sitting on the track. I mean, that's literally motorsport industry news. This is everywhere. I know NASCAR interviewed him and actually sat down with him. Did Dale Jr. I think he sat down with him too. Yeah. So I think it was good. I think it's very good for the sport, because that's something I've never seen ever in my time.
For Josh Williams, huge benefit to him. The cons of missing out on this weekend's racing was not really necessarily a con.
Nothing.
His sponsors have just backed him up since then. His sponsors have seen huge gains in their followings. Josh Williams, plus I think some crazy number on Twitter, like I think it's over 6,000 or something. I think I'm way off, but huge gains on social media for him, more exposure for him, his team, his brands, his causes. He works a lot with the children's hospitals and stuff like that. So turned what could have been an ugly situation into something really good. And to be quite fair, maybe the penalty was too harsh, and Josh Williams responded aggressively towards it, a little angrily, but so, and fans caught on to that. They were angry about it too. And here we are. So you don't get that from Cup really anymore. Xfinity is where it's at. And so if you're not watching just to see the racing and compare it to Cup, watch for the storylines. Names are made. Xfinity.
Literally that's their tagline. And the race is going to go, the truck race is going to be at 1:30 Eastern time tomorrow. And the Xfinity is going to be at 4 or 5 Eastern time. And that makes me think that could they be racing into the sunset at COTA?
I would imagine so.
Or close. Okay. This is so off topic, but it's still Formula One, or still motorsports in general. Have you seen the photos of when Formula One went to COTA last year, and they had the picture of them? It was coming over the hill at sunset, and the light, the sun was behind it. One of the most. I literally sat there and I was like, "This is a work of art. I am looking at a painting. This is Da Vinci. This is a piece of art that should be cherished somewhere and framed and never touched." So I think it's gonna be really cool to see the race at night, or I guess in the later part of the day. And at Sunday, we have the Cup race starting at 3:30 Eastern time. Garage opens at 12:30. fan access at 1, 2:45 is the drivers meeting. Driver enters at 3. So yeah, that's what's going on the Cup Series side. But other than that, though, I think I don't know. We've talked a lot about NASCAR, Formula One, hot takes on social media. Talked a lot about Josh Williams, driver fines, hood louvers, helmets, Funko Pops, a lot of different things. So other than that, that's all I think we got for the podcast. So Taylor, thank you so much for joining in and being a part of the podcast. Definitely going to have more podcasts with you in the future. So where can people find you? Where can people follow you? What is all of your social media handles? I know you have a lot of things going on, so give the people what they want. Where can they find you on social?
All right. So for TikTok and I guess TikTok right now. TikTok and Twitter. It's @_Taylor Kitchen_. That's where you can find me there. And then @above the yellow line on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, as well as Toby Christie.com on all social media platforms to see my full-length videos on the NASCAR Cup Series recaps and other industry news. So that's where you can find me. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I had a great time.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely going to have you on before. So from all the motorsports enthusiasts, it's late and I'm tired and I need more water. I ran out halfway through. I'll see you guys at the checker flag.